District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program. Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. What a whirlwind month July has been. There's been so much political turnover, unforeseen events, and as it relates to energy and conservation, there will be a lot of implications from the switch up from President Biden to VP Kamala Harris. I'm going to do a more deep dive into her record, comparing and contrasting with Trump later on, I think a little bit before the election, but I'm going to do a preliminary discussion over where VP Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee, is on conservation. I'm going to argue that she's going to put climate ahead of conservation. I want to remind you what positions this vice president has taken from her time as Attorney General to U.S. Senator, both of which were very short stints. If you thought President Biden was radical, wait until you hear what I have to say about her record. She is perhaps the most extreme U.S. Senator we've ever had. And they're slowly but surely trying to erase her record on what she's done regarding energy and the like. Most recently, they tried to say that she is backpedaling on her position on fracking bans. I doubt it because what they did with LNG export pauses, just as recent as February, consulting TikTok activists to forbid future construction of LNG export plants and projects until after the election, I don't believe a lick of what they've said. And they're trying to repackage her as some sort of moderate. She's not. So let's explain why she is not moderate on these issues, why she will perpetuate this kind of climate alarmism, net zero agenda, which will also negatively affect sportsmen and women because she's also supportive of these directives to ban lead, tackle, and bullets. She's also supportive of 30 by 30. California began the first 30 by 30 with marine life protection areas. So I'm going to go through a quick laundry list of her positions. First and foremost, a lot of people love to downplay the seriousness in terms of danger regarding the Green New Deal, which a lot of people dismiss and say that'll never be achieved. But elements of it are starting to be adopted through the Inflation Reduction Act, this whole of government approach that we see through the Biden-Harris administration. She can't walk away from net zero because her name is attached to the Biden-Harris administration. And she signs her name. Her name is everywhere next to Biden's along all these so-called accomplishments, or rather objectives that they have to go net zero. She supported the Green New Deal as an original co-sponsor. And in 2019, in a blog for Medium, you guys can read this for yourself. She said, "For too long, we have been governed by lawmakers who are beholden to big oil and big coal. They have refused to act on climate change. So it's on us to speak the truth, rooted in science fact, not science fiction." She went on to write, "Here's the truth. Climate change is real, and it is an existential threat to our country, our planet, and our future. With each passing day, the imminent threat of climate change grows, and we see it in everything from more instances of extreme weather to rapidly melting glaciers." Let me go through what else is also concerning about her. She also has worked with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Green New Deal backer in the House, to introduce legislation to provide protections for frontline communities as part of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal, if you were to, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. If you were to pursue it, how much in emissions would you reduce? Would you reduce temperatures by 1.5 degrees Celsius? What would be the economic impact? At best, you're only going to reduce temperatures by 0.2 of a degree Celsius while upending the economy, destroying our GDP. And then there's no measurable benefit to the environment. So that is what you need to know. She has said in previous remarks and statements that she wants to achieve net zero well before 2050, so 2040, 2045. She also has pushed really extreme legislation, kind of this ESG, DEI nexus of climate equity legislation in terms of the Climate Equity Act of 2020 to establish an Office of Climate and Environmental Justice Accountability, in the Office of Management and Budget to consider environmental justice factors. And in my initial research into EJ, Senator Chuck Grassley has actually investigated this, and he's worked with one of my board members at IWF, Donna Jackson. And they found that 90% of EJ funds and grants from the EPA have gone to overhead, payments, vacation, and other extraneous things, not to underserved communities that are affected by pollution. So that's what you need to know about environmental justice. She also, as a senator, sponsored the Environmental Justice for All Act to mandate quote, several environmental justice requirements, advisory bodies, and programs to address disproportionate adverse human health or environmental effects of federal laws and programs on communities of color, low-income communities, or tribal and indigenous people. She also endorsed in 2019 a national ban on oil and fracking. She has agreed with electric bus pushes and wants to make sure that freight trucks and school buses are net zero too. She, as Attorney General, launched an investigation into ExxonMobil over so-called carbon emissions. She will double down, this is what I've written about extensively, on the American Climate Corps, which is an FDR-era program to basically put the federal government in charge of conservation efforts. So they're going to be utilizing and deploying a whole of government approach to employ people through government jobs in so-called conservation areas. So this, to me, is concerning because it should be private sector, individuals, nonprofits, those away from the federal government who are dictating outcomes for bettering conservation decisions. This worries me a lot because in the past, the Civilian Conservation Climate Corps, or the CCC, the predecessor rather, of the ACC, it was not an effective economic pipeline. After 8-9 years, it was disbanded because World War II was happening and people were working in response to obviously what was happening. And you look at the National Park Service analysis of the CCC, they found that it actually was not working as intended. This ACC was also created without congressional approval, so there's a lot of legal questions about whether or not this program can be authorized and deployed, but they're promising to employ thousands of people and have it be part of the economy. But the government coming in here and trying to shape and affect conservation in this grandiose manner is very concerning. It'll undermine conservation efforts, create more red tape, more roadblocks. So she's going to double down on that, and that concerns me and should concern you. She will be more aggressive on 30 by 30. As I mentioned, California has experimented with 30 by 30 policies well before the Biden-Harris administration. What this will do is take productive lands out of commission, not only for grazing, farming, land management, etc., even for hunting and fishing. What we've seen them done with national monument declarations. They say, well, we're going to respect sportsmen and women and their will and give them access, but all their preferred alternatives, most of them would diminish recreational shooting access, curb your access to hunt and fish on public lands, and national monument designations, especially under Democratic administrations, don't respect hunting and fishing management as a scientific tool. They often discard it. So she will double down on national monuments, use the power of the purse as president, heaven forbid if she were to become the president. That makes me extremely nervous. So she's going to double down on national monument designation. She's going to cast aside hunters and anglers more than Biden has. If that's even saying much of a deviation, she's going to be even more extreme. And she is cozy with these environmental groups. Don't kid yourselves. She loves the Sierra Club. She loves the NRDCs of the world, the Center for Biological Diversity. So she's going to double down and lend an ear to them even more than President Biden has. So that should make you nervous. So that's why I worry and anticipate she will double down on closures of land through national monument designations, lead tackle, ammo, and bullet phase-outs. She's going to discard the opinions of sportsmen and women. I bet you she's even going to double down on vessel speed restrictions in the various different coasts because, again, she has the ear of environmentalists. She's even more of a foot soldier to them than President Biden is because they thought he wasn't going far enough. Again, she's a Green New Deal original co-sponsor. That says a lot. She doesn't like oil and gas. And now she's trying to backtrack on fracking, which is hilarious because you can't erase that she's openly in support of that. She was also the tiebreaker vote in the Green New Deal Light Inflation Reduction Act. If you didn't know this, she was the tiebreaker vote in that. That is very concerning. She also supports the EPA's electric vehicle mandate, which will require manufacturers to produce 2/3 of new cars that are EVs by 2032. And as senator, she supported the Zero-Emissions Vehicle Act as early as 2019. That should raise some alarm bells. And she also has said she is open to restricting red meat consumption, even though she confessed to liking a burger or two on occasion. And she has also said she would support banning plastic straws, even though she conceded paper straws are flimsy. That's just a really quick snapshot into what her record has been. And if you're a conservationist, you should be worried that she's putting climate considerations over true conservation efforts. She's going to double down on what President Biden has been doing. Her name is slapped onto all these proclamations and announcements and pronouncements. Anytime there is a new rule that is finalized, anytime there's an announcement for all these policies, she has her name right next to his. So this is very much her agenda and her legacy as vice president as it is President Biden. So don't be duped. Don't be fooled. You're going to be getting more of this kind of climate alarmism, ESG, detracting from conservation agenda that has been very apparent across these last 3 years of a Biden-Harris administration. Don't take my word for it. Everything I've mentioned is included in the show notes for your reading, for your curiosity. And granted, I was not going to vote for her anyway, personally speaking, independent of my affiliations. There's no way I'm going to be voting for her. But those of you who are kind of on the fence and don't know where she stands, I know some of you may not be in agreement with my politics. As a conservative, I'm pretty out there with my views, and I don't hold back on where I stand, and I've been very critical, but I can still be objective and tell you this is where she stands. If you've been very alarmed by what Biden and Harris have been doing, you don't like the direction conservation policy is going, you're worried about these top-down policies, she's going to be a continuation of this and even more aggressive. That should extremely concern you. That should alarm anyone who calls themselves a true conservationist. So do your own research, but I'm here to warn you that this is what we're going to get should she prevail, if she were to get the nomination, because there is discussion whether or not she actually will get it. They're coronating her right now. But if she were to become the presumptive nominee or become the nominee after right now being the presumptive nominee, this is what you can expect. They're going to try to erase her record and say that she's not for these bans or not for this, but the record shows all the articles of her past statements when she was campaigning as president in 2019, from her work as VP now to her time previously as Attorney General. She has been a foe to true conservation, energy production. And if I were you in Pennsylvania or these other states where fracking and oil and gas are, do not believe a word she says. She's a flip-flopper and she's looking to get your vote, and she's not to be trusted. That is what I have to say. We're going to do more of a deep dive comparing her record to former President Trump's, very soon, a little bit before the election. People love those compare and contrast episodes, so I will do my best to offer such an analysis as the election gets closer and approaches. If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.